And we're live. Welcome everybody to another NPM Open RFC call. Today's date is Wednesday, July 21st, 2021. We'll be following along in the agenda that was posted in issue 416 in the NPM RFC's repo. If you haven't already, feel free to add yourselves to the attendees list in the HackMD meeting notes doc, which I'm spamming here in chat. Just a quick code of conduct acknowledgement. If you haven't, please read the code of conduct that's linked in the issue, the NPM RFC's issue for this agenda. We just ask that you please be respectful in these calls, and as we discuss features and issues within the RFC's repo, as well as like any NPM repo. And if you can please raise your hand if you'd like to interject or comment on these calls, and we'll call on you. And yeah, just to be mindful of others and please be respectful on these calls. Apologize that we haven't been able to meet for the last few weeks. We took a bit of a break, and our team had a week off. So we're back at it, and hopefully we'll continue to have these calls weekly. As a bit of an announcement, just before that break, we did cut a few releases, most notably 7.20. So that introduced npm pkg, which is a pretty cool new feature to actually modify, edit, get, set, update fields within package.json using a similar syntax to npm view, which we think is going to be really helpful for some folks. And we're hoping to improve that experience going forward. As well as Nilf helped push through the location config/flag, which we also think is going to be really helpful and might set us up in a good place for future major versions where we might change some of those default locations specifically for maybe npm config. So if you haven't, please update to the latest npm and give us feedback on the work we're doing there. And we'll, as I said before, we'll be following along in the agenda here. Just wanted to open up the floor for anybody if they have announcements around the community. If there's no announcements, let's just dive in. The first item that we had was this RRFC by Rebecca. Include get head when publishing from subdirectories. So this is issue 412, which I'll link here. And Rebecca, did you want to maybe speak to this?
Sure. This appears to be actually pretty minimal. I mean, it was a pretty minimal suggestion, which is just, that, get head is included when you publish from the directory that has your package.json, if that's a Git folder. If the Git folder isn't there, then it doesn't include get head. So this means publishing from workspaces does not get get head. This actually ends up showing up most commonly with publishes from PNPM, because PNPM uses npm publish under the hood. Anyway. It turns out there's been a lot of discussion about this, which it seems pretty uncontroversial. In fact, there is an open PR that implements this that was failing on Node 4, but that's it. So I don't see any reason that can't just be, So it seems like that can just be taken at this point.
Yeah, I do think that if we're going to drop Node 4 from read package.json, that's probably overdue.
It in fact has been dropped. It's not in the CI anymore. It was just in the CI back when the PR was made.
Right. Oh, okay. Even better then.
Yeah.
I'm just checking to see if we. Yeah, and engines is node greater than or equal to 10. So yeah, we're fine. Let's. Anybody saying nay? I mean, the only downside is we're gonna be walking up the folder path to look for a Git repo, but
no, we're not.
We're not. There's a quick way to do it.
There's a get way to do it. I need to fix npm get too. The is get function is all wrong. This reminds me of something I was working on 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a proper way to ask Git, hey, who are you? And are you? That's what we should be doing.
Okay, cool. Then
even if it's a working workspace or whatever. Like, that was the
yeah,
big.
this is a little tangential. I remember there was some reason why we didn't do that in isGet, but we can talk about that later. Yes, so that's then if there's a better way to do it in read package JSON, that's fine. But even if it is just walking up the folder tree to find it, that's fine because we only use the old read package JSON when we kind of don't care about performance, right? We only do it for the one-time publish time thing. Everything else is using the fast one.
I'm just taking notes here. I apologize for the delay. Our resident note taker, Roy, is actually on paternity leave now for the next 6 months. So I'm going to be a little bit slower than normal. But it sounds like a couple actions here. Gar, are you considering reviewing the git lib? Is that also like to make this more efficient?
It was
is git check.
I need to get back to where I was on that train. That has nothing to do with this RFC. Somehow in the last 2 weeks ago when I was doing all the bug fixing, I found that bug in Git, and I need to find what it was related to so I can pick that thread back up because it was affecting something. But basically, I'll paste it in the chat here and I'll say it out loud. Basically, git rev parse -- git dir will tell you what your Git directory is and bail if it's not a Git directory.
Cool. So we can have Git do the walking
Yes.
up for us. And Git, there's a Git rev parse that also shows you the current SHA. So I don't recall what that invocation is, but we use it all over in we use that in the npm cli/git repo. So yeah, maybe read package JSON should just use npm cli/git and like use the same isGit and current head methods.
Yes, if it's not already.
Okay. Sounds good to me.
Cool. So we'll queue that up and we'll report back hopefully next week if we've done anything on that. I'll add the action. So queuing up the next RFC, we had issue number 411. This is a discussion around, and I'll paste it here. npm init should initialize a Git repo. I know, Jordan, you had some comments back to the original poster, Rafi. Did you maybe want to speak to this a bit in terms of your concerns around having npm init essentially initialize a Git repo at the same time it creates the package JSON?
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that there are workflows where this is convenient, certainly. But the workflow I use for creating my many packages does not particularly benefit from it. That doesn't alone, of course, have any impact on whether it would be useful. I think the real challenge is that NPM has always heavily favored Git and GitHub, but not ever required either. And I can't think of any reasonable way to automatically run Git init safely.
Well,
and without completely excluding non-Git version control systems.
There's two things there. The first is, like Gar was talking about, we can use the npm cli git, isGit method. So if you're already in a subdirectory of a repo, we'll just not do that because we can tell that you're already in a repo. Second, we can also check in a number of places whether or not you have Git installed on your path. And so if that's the case, then we'll just, it could be a prompt that's like, do you want, what Git remote do you want? And do you want to initialize a Git repo?
Also, having this opt-in is like I think a totally fine thing. Like if it's a npm rc config and I do npm init -y, it just does it for me. I think that's a pretty fine solution.
Initializing the remote, like I would actually like it to go the full bore, and also say, like, also set the remote origin to, you know, github.com/isaacs/ whatever the name of the thing is. But I could do that in my own init script. I don't have to necessarily have npm init do it.
Gar, you have your hand up.
This feels like a feature request, and we're all like, yeah, that would be nice, but is this really something like that we see it as need for, and we're going to put on our roadmap, or is this something like, yeah, if you submitted this, we'd approve it?
Well, given that we have that easy plugin thing, though, can't someone just make this as a thing first and
That was going to
see
be my next comment. Thank you.
how it works and get people to try it out? Because like, it makes perfect sense to me if you point to an existing npm init plugin and say, look at how awesome this is and all the kinks are worked out. Can we upstream it into core? Like, that seems like an awesome thing to do. But like, the point of a plugin mechanism is hopefully to avoid these unproven feature requests, right? Like to sidestep dealing with those edge cases.
Yeah, so somebody can create a template package, like create package with and get or something like that, and then you do npm, see like how many people like that behavior, I guess, like npm init. But like, it's hard to get. I'm sure it would be hard to get people to. We could just poll it as well and see how many people are actually initialized, do essentially npm init, and then do git init right after that, or vice versa even, and just see, like, you know, how many people are doing this on average. If that's a common workflow. Yeah, like Gar was saying, npm git init, you know, and people running npm init and using one of those initializers packages to like do this for you. Like that's an option for them today, but yeah, I feel like it's going to be hard. What's the threshold for validation that this is something that's useful, right?
There is in fact already a npm init git available, which does that.
And Ed, do you have the link? Is it just called npm init git?
It's the create git package. So yeah.
Okay. So there we go.
Yep.
So
Feature request. Let's sure, sounds good. I mean, the way that we say if you submitted a patch, we would accept it, is we approve and ratify this RFC and somebody gets to it. It doesn't have to be necessarily high priority or, you know, the next thing the core team is working on.
Yeah.
But, you know, one of us might pick it up as a small mosquito task at some point. That's fine.
Should we also decide in advance what's going to happen? Like what we might want to tell people if they show up and say, well, I want to make it automatically make an SVN repo or a Mercurial repo. Like, what do we tell those people?
We say no. 99% of the npm packages are like in Git, and some mid 90s% of those are on GitHub. Like, there's a reason it gets.
No, that's fine. Then
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I'm suggesting in a question form if we should perhaps draw that line now as part of approving this RFC.
This just want to make sure this is just a comment, like a request for comment, right? Like it's just a conversation. So it hasn't been even proposed as like an RFC where we're saying, you know, this is where something we accept. So next steps here could be even what you're saying, Jordan, like, can you write an RFC for the fact that we have a preference for get, and that commands will most likely prefer to initialize or interact with Git version management. Like that could be a potential like action or comment back to this person. Alongside, if you want to see this, feel free to make a PR happen.
Yes, I'm saying thumbs up to your request for comment. Go for it. Sounds fine. We don't really need to keep talking about it.
So action there is just comment back with
Let's talk about pre-unpack lifecycle script.
So PR 403. And is Ryan on the call?
Yep. Yeah, I'm here.
Awesome. Did you want to give a quick, yeah.
Yeah. So this stems from some use cases revolving around needing some code to run prior to dependencies being installed. Going back to as far as from my recollection, like NPM version 3, the pre-install hook would run prior to dependencies being installed, but as of version 7, that's no longer the case. I think that there's been a lot of discussion around, if it's a bug or if it's not a bug. But I'm not here to discuss that. I just want to make sure that we have a path forward for any consumers of NPM who need to run a script before dependencies are then installed.
So I think your versions might be a little off. So the pre-install scripts being run prior to the existence of any dependencies has never really been a guarantee. And even in NPM 1.0, some of your package's dependencies, right? When we were doing like the legacy bundling always, some of your dependencies might be deduplicated up to a higher level. And so they would, of course, be there before your package gets installed because they're at a shallower point in the tree. And so pre-install back in those days was sort of run in this state where some of your dependencies may exist, but none of them are guaranteed. And I think with NPM 3, it got to, Rebecca is on the call, would probably remember better than I do. The behavior was, it's still indeterminate, but because we're deduping up front, more of them are more likely to have already been unpacked. And in NPM 5 or 6, I think it was shifted to just be like, look, we're just going to unpack everything, and then we're going to pre-install everything, and then we're going to install and post-install everything. And with NPM 7, that's how it works now. So I'm kind of curious, I guess, sort of the overlap or the intersection between this and a top-level sort of tree mutation script lifecycle event. In other words, so would pre-unpack happen? Like you have an example of it in a top-level app, but if I install that module as a dependency, does pre-unpack run before it gets unpacked?
Just to clarify, Isaac, every time we talk about these scripts, we seem to get confused about whether we're talking about the application I'm installing the graph of versus a package who is being installed.
Mm-hmm.
So I personally don't have any intuition about a pre-install script in a dependency running at all, let alone at any particular time. But if I put pre-install in my application, I expect to be able to modify package JSON in there before anything is attempted to be installed, because the name of it is pre-install, and that's what words mean. So like I have no opinion on the dependency thing, but in the application use case, it feels just as bizarre as the pre-publish debacle to have pre-install run not before any dependencies exist and before package JSON's read.
It runs before their install events run, but the
events is not something I care about. I type npm install, I type pre-install in my scripts. I'm thinking before the install happens.
Yes,
events are not.
I understand, okay. And I agree, and that makes a ton of sense. Another thing that is understandable and makes a ton of sense and is 100% contradictory to that is that people use their dependency scripts in their pre-install script and in their install script. So like, I mean, okay, that's great. But when we had it working that way, the common complaint was, why isn't ESLint present for me to run a lint prior to install? Like, and it's just like, well, you can't have that both ways. Like we have to put the code somewhere.
Sure.
That's to be reachable.
But it seems like the solution here was the same one for pre-publish, which is give the people what they're asking for instead of giving them a properly named script that actually captures their intent.
So just
I mean,
to be
I'm
mindful-
not talking about breaking changes and stuff. I'm just talking about like the ideal scenario to me would be that somebody who wants to run scripts that need dependencies can't ever do it in something called pre-install, because that makes no sense. It's like a category error.
So I want to get to Gar because I know you've had your hand up for a while. And then
Sorry,
Ryan.
Gar. Thank you.
And then Ryan, I see you also want to probably rebuttal here as well. So Gar, go ahead.
Yeah, the pre-install ship sailed. We just need to, that needs to just absorb into people's brains. And it means it runs before the install script. We can fix it in 8. Sorry. I like the idea of this gets us towards what we want, which is having these mental models of this. These are the scripts that run before I have my dependencies, and these are the scripts I run after my dependencies. So I like, I don't know that the name is what we want, but the solution should be that we are pushing towards having this model of these scripts run outside like the context of all of my code, even like this is going to happen during the install process before I can access my real code, right? So I can set things up. My code's going to run after this versus my code's ready. I could run ESLint, right? And that's what pre-install is today. So I really like the direction this is going, and that's kind of what we need to have in our minds as we talk through this, is helping with that problem of now we have these mental models of code that runs before anything happens and code that runs in where the mental model of where pre-install currently runs. So that was my comment from the beginning.
Ryan?
Yeah, so I was going to say about the fact of, claims that users would like to have basically access to their dependencies within their pre-install. That's fine, but we have a method of doing, like, you can still work around that. Whereas when you're trying to do a pre-install where Node, run something before dependencies are installed, there's no real way to hack or work around that. So like in NPM 6, we would be able to use the pre-install script. NPM 7, we're not able to if it's something that needs to run before the dependencies. Like in the case of getting like private repository details from like a cloud provider.
Right. So the issue is like I depend on something, but before you can even resolve that dependency, like leaving aside unpacking or reifying it, before you can even resolve it or fetch it or get the packment for it, you have to do something.
Mm-hmm.
That's a different lifecycle event, like a qualitatively different lifecycle event than pre-unpack, I think. In the sense that they happen at different phases in the process, right? If we want to be, and maybe there's 2 lifecycle events to add here, like that's maybe fine. In both of those cases, though, there's no way that you could access your deps because we haven't even resolved them, right? Or we haven't unpacked them.
Right.
Some of them may be present, and then there's if it's before we even unpack this step. So here's let's say there's a script that I want to run before my code gets unpacked, then I can't even access the files within my package, leaving aside let alone any of my deps. So yeah, I think we just have to be very, I feel like we just have to be very precise about when exactly this lifecycle event will be triggered within the process of dependency resolution, dependency reification, and then other lifecycle scripts happening.
Rebecca?
I guess I just wanted some clarification on, so yeah, the previous behavior for app level was that pre-install ran before anything was installed. Did that change? And if it did, how is it different than a post-install event?
So for the top level, Arborist does not concern itself with the top level scripts. That's entirely done in the CLI.
Okay.
Let me just look. I don't want to rely on my meat brain. So we run, yeah, we run all of them after reification. So how it differs from post install is it runs before the install event. Like it's just, we run a bunch of stuff once we've reified the tree.
Okay.
The reason being that, again, like because of the complaint that I want to run linting on pre-install, or more, less, in a less silly example, in order for my bin script to exist, I have to run this command to build it, right? And so if you try to link my bins before my pre-install script happens, it's not going to work. And my pre-install script, in order to build that executable file, has to use one of my dependencies, right? I have to use Webpack or something, or Babel.
I guess I'm just not clear why you wouldn't use an install script for that.
I think install happens after linking bins.
I mean,
and pre-install happens before.
Ren, did you want
could
to?
be.
Yeah, I was gonna, just kind of add on to what Rebecca had mentioned. And that's the idea, is that if I wanted to lint or something, like I have a hook available to do that. Like I can do that in the install script, or I can, I have a path forward on that. Whereas if I need to go forward with something from like an application level, if I do npm install, if I need to go forward with something that runs before my dependencies are resolved, that used to be pre-installed. Now in version 7, I mean, I'm not saying it was like it was best practice, but that's something that we have grown dependent on from previous versions. So it's breaking change without a path forward.
Right. Jordan?
Yeah, I think we're asking the wrong question here. The name determines when it runs. If we want it to run in a different place, we need a different name. There is no ambiguity if you narrow to app use case versus dep use case in each of those two use cases. There's no ambiguity about when it runs, I think, because a user is typing the script, so the user's mental model applies. Pre-install runs before install. Like I can't see how that's debatable. And like in the app case, and in the dep case, I haven't thought about it. I don't know, but like I think that we should always be looking at. Well, yeah. So as far as the install script is tricky, because I've tried to use it and it doesn't work historically. Like I don't remember if it breaks the install entirely or if it just ignores my install script or whatever. But it like doesn't do it didn't do what I expected it to do. But regardless of history and regardless of the path from here to the ideal state, I think the ideal state should be that two things. It should be clear when looking at a script in package.json whether it's going to run when I'm being installed elsewhere or when I'm installing my things, app use case, or the package use case versus the app use case. And it should also be clear solely from the name of the script when it runs, like before and after which things. And if it's not, we need a better name. And like, even if that name is like post install pre-bin linking, like it doesn't matter how long and crappy it is, because readability is more important than writability. And like people need to be able to know what it means. So we had this conversation a number of RFCs ago where I think Gar was at some point on I'm sure what's a long list. You had looking into like how to sort of deconflate the app use case versus the package use case for scripts. I think that's something we need to solve, because I feel like all these questions just kind of fall out of that, or all these answers rather to these questions fall out of that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how long ago that was, but I know that there was some effort to clean up the docs that we had around lifecycle events.
As far as I know, the docs reflect reality now. It's just that we all know that the reality is, without reading those docs, right, that the scripts are still ambiguous. And honestly, the more I've thought about this, and I know Nelf and I have talked about this, the solution is going to be a new top-level attribute in the package JSON that is backwardly compatible, that allows us to say, all right, Yeah, to unpack this ambiguity. I don't remember the specifics of it, but basically the path forward is something new.
So are we saying that the existing nomenclature is not going to be, are we gonna have to change and create new lifecycle?
Life cycles need to be outside the scripts. Scripts are just things you can run with npm run, and they should only
Right.
ever be that.
Right.
Correct.
Life cycle events should be their own.
Which run when you're being installed into another project.
Well, that's a life cycle event, and there's a life cycle event of I am mutating my tree, and there's a life cycle event of I am being installed, right?
As long as each life cycle event is also not run in both use cases, I think that's amazing. But like
So
if you use an event called install, that is unavoidably ambiguous.
Right. So unfortunately, right now, we've muddied the waters, right? So like people are relying on this like currently within the ecosystem. So it's like, how do we move forward without completely breaking everybody's workflows?
By doing both, by basically saying we have these lifecycle events that run, but we also are going to run, if you have a script called start, we're going to keep running it for now. And the 8 break is we stop running things in scripts during lifecycle events. We only refer to the things in the lifecycle object. We could just refer to scripts, that's fine. But that's how you get there from here. Is you do both, and then the breaking change is you drop the bad one.
I'd argue that maybe that's the 9 break rather than the 8 break, but sure. Yeah,
Or we never break it.
Yeah, this is NPM. We still support crap from Node 0.4.
So just coming back to the original RFC then, Ryan, if there was a way forward without introducing a net new pre-unpack or lifecycle event, like pre-unpack, like, and instead pre-install, like, go ahead, Isaac.
So it sounds like, so the problem with having pre-install in the top level app run prior to calling arborist.reify, right, npm 6 style, is that, and which I think was originally how one of the npm 7 betas actually worked, and we found it didn't properly install a whole bunch of projects. The reason being that the way it happened in npm 6, I want to say like the deps were unpacked, but then the root one happened before they got built or something.
I was just looking at that code. It runs before literally anything.
Before anything gets unpacked.
Yeah, before it looks at the tree.
Weird. Yeah, what we found was that it didn't, we got some failures in, I want to say, Canary in the Gold Mine or somewhere, where it was not able to properly install packages. And we're like, okay, well, we'll just put it after the reify, but still before all the other things. Yeah, so then the question is, like, is it worth adding a pre-reification script now in the current structure of things? Or should that just be, or should our task be, like Gar was suggesting, let's make a list of all of the relevant points in the life cycle process, right? I am the top level dep. I'm beginning the process of building my ideal tree. I'm beginning the process of, reading the shrink wrap file. Like all of these things where we go step by step through the install algorithm. What is the kind of life cycle hook that we want to fire there, and leave that apart. You cannot run those manually. Like all that they can be is like a command that is right in that spot. Then the scripts can be just sort of, your npm as a make clone list of tasks that you can run at various times arbitrarily from within lifecycle events or not. And we have backwards compatibility where, at this particular lifecycle event, if it is not specified, the default behavior is npm run pre-install if exists, right? so there's a pretty straightforward way to do that. And then the breaking change to come later is we drop those defaults.
Yes, so we need an RFC for that. So that's the action item here. I think if most folks on the call agree with that kind of way forward that Gar's proposed as well.
But we could
One
have
thing
a
to add, if we're already talking about having a specifically different entry point for lifecycle events and leaving the old behavior for backwards compatibility, maybe it should revert the old behavior back to what npm 6 did, because most of the stuff that's going to rely on the old behavior for an extended period of time is stuff that was created when npm was 6 or earlier than that.
And Isaac, your comment there when we were trying to do this originally and mimic the same behavior as npm 6, that we were just not able to do that when one of the initial betas. Is that what you commented on?
that's my foggy recollection, which is probably at least 10% wrong.
So now that V7's been out for at least G8 for at least 6 months, and some people might be relying on how this is operating today, do we I'm not sure we want to chalk it up
but
as
to
a
be
bug.
clear, it has not yet shipped in an LTS version of Node.
Sure, but there's still quite a few people using it. The real thing that's being brought up here in the feedback for this RFC for Ryan, I think, is should this pre-unpack? Basically, there's two separate lifecycle events I think that we are sort of talking about and conflating here. One of them is before beginning the process of build ideal tree, and the other is before beginning the process of reify. And there's value, I can see value in both of them, right?
Yeah, I'm just taking notes. Ryan, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so one of the items that I put under the unresolved questions in bike shedding was to make sure we didn't want to revert back to the pre-install functionality of version 6. I mean, I consult, I know a lot of NPM users are relying on the idea of pre-install running prior to dependencies being installed. And so, I mean, it's out there. And I think that the user base that, has this breaking change in V7 doesn't have a path forward. Whereas if it, was the reasoning before was, if somebody wanted to run linting or something prior, I think that they still have a way forward. Whereas this use case does not have a way forward. So, I mean, I think if possible, we might want to, going forward, take a look and see why we weren't able to reproduce this functionality in version 7.
Yeah, at this point, I think the only challenge there is that, right or wrong, maybe it was a foolish decision. At this point, the moving pre-install to happen but at the root level prior to calling Arborist reify is going to be a breaking change. And it's kind of like, well, we made this breaking change, maybe even unintentionally, going from 6 to 7, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we can make a breaking change within 7. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's fair. I feel like, yeah, it's a difficult situation to be in. But if I were playing straight numbers, I would guess that the breaking change that occurred from 6 to 7 has more of an impact than if we were to break within 7.
If we were to revert it, yeah.
Yeah.
You may be right. I mean, it may be worth incurring some Semver sin points in order to improve lives of users. That's what really matters.
Well, even my ideologically strict interpretation of Semver would allow for this one, for what it's worth, because it was unintentional and undocumented, and all the previous versions did it the old way. So you could argue it's a
and then
patch.
Gar went and documented it. So now we're
That's fair.
Well, the question is it a feature that we're now breaking, or is it a bug that we're now fixing? if we want to go that far.
It's Schrodinger's feature.
Yeah.
Where are the docs that cover this detail? Because the link docs don't seem to
It's the-
discuss when it runs. It
it's
just
the-
says the order they run in.
It's the scripts doc. Darcy linked it in chat.
Yeah, no, I was looking at that doc, and it just says they run pre-install, install, post-install, pre-publish, but like it doesn't say.
I believe it's in that order, no?
Yeah, they are in that order.
They
That
specify
didn't
the
change.
order. You're right, but they don't specify.
The context.
Yeah.
Is that what you're
kind
looking
of
for?
the
Yeah.
context of the life cycle.
Yes.
So I
sorry.
mean, I guess we're not actually violating what our docs say if we move pre-install to happen pre-reify.
So just to be mindful of time, I'd love to get a couple action items and then move on. I think the one is at least is to introduce or create an RFC for this net new potentially lifecycle field, lifecycle events object. If we do intend to move away from scripts, essentially having these lifecycle scripts like muddy the scripts object. And then the second would be essentially queuing up what we believe is a patch to existing pre-install to run and mimic the behavior of the npm 6 lifecycle event. I think that would satisfy this, and then we don't necessarily have to move forward with this RFC. Would that be accurate, Brian?
That would be wonderful.
Okay, I'll write those two down. And then we can move on to the next RFC. Feel free, if you had other comments, to add them to that previous RFC itself. The next one was by Roy, who's not here. Unfortunately, PR number 343. This is the automatically switching contexts RC. I believe we've left this open while we're considering implementing the some workspace root filtering within Arborist itself. I'm not sure, Isaac, if you have any context. I'm not sure who the last person was that would have commented on this. It looks like it was me.
Yeah, I don't think there's been any updates since our last conversation. But where I recall us kind of landing on was we add a workspace-root config value, which will allow you to specify the workspace root. And if you're in a current, if you're in a directory that has that has a workspace root config, then it'll be like, okay, well, I guess I'm a workspace within that workspace root. And if your current working directory is not a valid workspace within that workspace root project, then I don't know, we throw an error or something. Otherwise, we basically treat the workspace root as the prefix and the current working directory as the workspace config. The second step of that to make that extra nice is, and there was some debate on exactly when and if we do this, but we could put a project level .npmrc file in all of the workspaces to specify the workspace root as the current working directory. We can do that either on first reify or on npm init-w. Or both. I think either one is kind of fine. I was pushing for like, let's just put the file there, and if people don't want it, they can remove it or override it or whatever.
Well, removing it wouldn't work if it's going to get re-added, but altering the config value would be fine.
Sure, yeah. We're Tierney, that adding a .npmrc.json is that's a whole other conversation. If you
Get beaten over the head every time I bring that up.
Well, we should have an RFC for that just so that we can shoot it down appropriately.
I mean,
just one time,
look,
right, in a reproducible way.
You only have to tell me to write an RFC once, and I'll write it.
Well, I've not written that RFC because I know it's just probably going to get shot down. But
no, okay, then better yet, let's write an RFC for never ever having more than one config file format.
That's probably the reason it would get shut down, right? So.
Well, we should probably write an RFC for switching from JSON to from INI to JSON, but like that should be what
Yes.
That should be a one-way switch. It should not be, now we support both.
Yes.
Okay, so any other updates or any other feedback or comments on 343? If not,
No, I think we
let's
have a
move.
path forward there.
Cool. The next RFC was 273, NPM workspaces config management. Again, we haven't really moved forward with this, really. This essentially would be probably introducing a new workspaces subcommand and allowing you to quickly and easily add, remove workspaces. We sort of introduced this behavior since npm init does support workspaces. So you can essentially add, you just can't remove a workspace to your package.json easily. And now with the npm pkg subcommand, you can also sort of manage the workspaces field within package.json as well. So there's a couple options there, but I imagine in the future we might want to revisit this and flush this out again. I think there's some updates that need to happen. So I'm going to remove the agenda label unless other folks had comments for that RFC specifically. I think it needs to be updated based on the work we've done since it was originally created.
Yeah, I think this is straightforward until we kind of get a new champion for it. I don't see it getting super high priority, but you know, that can happen. It's just we're not likely to get Roy back in the immediate term.
Yep. And moving on to the last RFC we had on the agenda, and hopefully have a couple minutes extra as well for any other items that we might not have gotten to. PR and RFC 1A2. This is the NPM audit licenses. Tierney, I know you worked with Roy just before you left a little bit, and you have a PR drafted, I think.
Yes, there's a draft PR on CLI. It's by no means done, like not even close, but it has the basics there. I need to find some time to continue working on it. I think honestly, Roy got me a pretty decent amount of the way there on like figuring out what I need to do to make npm CLI work. So yeah, if I need help, I'll ask, but should be good for now. I also like, I'm not unless there's a timeline for npm 8, I'm probably not going to be like aggressively pushing this, but I'm happy to prioritize it if it's something that the CLI would, the team would prefer to be prioritized.
For sure. Given that, is there any other comments or any other subjects that folks want to bring up while we have 10 minutes of time? ZB, did you want to?
I just posted 2 items. So one is just to let Isaacs know that I think I'm done with my PR to Arborist. I changed a few things there according to the tip I got, and updated tests. And now the only issue is something wrong with coverage, but I've seen other places with similar issue being commented out of coverage. So that's probably a known issue, but I would appreciate some feedback to finish this off. And
take a look today.
Thanks. No rush, just wanted to grab your attention and this meeting is good for that. And I also fulfilled the last of my action items from a meeting like 3 meetings ago or something, where I was to report an issue on the CLI for npm audit fix --JSON to return a diff. So that's reported, but I don't know if, well, I might be able to help with that, but I would probably need some pointers before I can even start. And when we last talked about it, you sounded like it's kind of obvious for you. So don't know if I'm just gonna waste more time. And there's one more item. So I linked to issues filtered by author. I hope the link works. So the second thing I reported is an issue I found where there's content missing in audit output from npm 7, where there's via fields missing on items that are definitely not top level. And I have one example there. So it can be reproduced on a repository I link to. Got that as a report to npm audit resolver, debugged that, found out that my algorithm for figuring out the tree is a bit naive and fixed it, but then found out that there's stuff literally missing from the output.
Well, that sounds like a bug.
Yep.
Cool.
That's all I had for today.
Thanks, CB. I've added some notes there capturing that, and we'll follow up for sure. Did any other folks have any other items they want to bring up or any other issues? Feature requests? Got 7 minutes. I'll give you 7 minutes back if you'd like, or 6 minutes now at this point. Awesome. So feel free to continue to submit PRs and RFCs. Appreciate everybody jumping on today, and we'll hopefully see you next week as well. And expect, as usual, a weekly release of the CLI to be cut tomorrow. And thank you so much for jumping on, and we'll see you next week. Cheers.
Thanks.
Thanks.